Sisters and brothers, welcome to Afrikan Genius, the podcast promoting Pan-African thought, arts, and culture, cultivating the universal African mind. I am your co-host, Uncle ASAR ALKEBULAN.
And I'm Wesley Pepper, based in South Africa. And I was supposed to say something. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. This is a side project that ASAR, the brother ASAR ALKEBULAN, myself conceptualized, and we want to explore. We're very passionate about Pan-Africanism and about African mind. As I said, we want to explore like academia and things like that, the arts, and just people who is making some form of change. Because as you know, we're living in 2023, and if you're living in 2023, what is it now? February 2023, then you survived a pandemic, a war in the Ukraine, and what else is there? And if you go to South Africa, a lot of other shit, which means that you survive. And we want to explore that. We want to see how people are surviving. We want to know how they impact. Because if COVID-19 taught us one thing, is that we all hurt the same. So, greetings, Igor. My sister, let me just get your name correctly. Dr. Rosani Matoso, did I pronounce that correctly? Yeah, greetings, man. And Dr. Igor Miranda, we spoke briefly offline. You guys said you've been in South Africa, so I think you know a little bit about my part of the world. I haven't been in your part of the world, but so greetings, everybody, and welcome.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be talking about Pan-Africanism and everything that is related to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Sure, for sure. ASAR, do you want to start off? And we'll just run the conversation will be very organic. I always like to start off with what the overall theme is. So we'll just ask your guys your vision on all of that, and I'll just start taking and start listening and picking on certain topics, and we'll just move with it from there.
So sure, I met Igor. I like to call him Dr. Miranda, but I met him at the University of Texas. I met him at the University of Texas at Austin, and we hit it off right away. And come to behold, we're both Pan-Africanists. So the first recording that I did with you, I talked about my development into Pan-Africanism, and I hope he shared that with the listeners.
Yeah. So I am from a city in Brazil called Salvador, and this city is like 80% of Black people. So we are the majority of the city, but it's not only that. Our city is like, since old times, the city is like a Pan-Africanist city. From everything that happens here, we got to preserve a lot of African culture, and we had a lot of movements of resistance against racism and colonialism. So that explains my background, because all I have now from my understanding of the world as an African person that was born outside of Africa, this is very common here, and we take that. It is very common for everyone here to identify themselves as African. It's not a weird thing. So thinking about Africa and our ancestors and our culture here makes us to always think how we can engage in the fight against racism and oppression, the white oppression, basically. So that made my consciousness about being Black, and also being part of the African people in the world.
So Wesley, just for a second, I want everybody to notice that we're all African people, but we're all speaking with a different accent.
Yeah,
and it may be the result of the colonial, the oppressors. But we're not speaking an African language, so I just thought that would be important. But Dr. Rosani, she was telling me yesterday her development was more or less from her parents, and if she could talk a little bit about that, if she would.
Maybe my comfortable if I'm speaking in Portuguese and Igor translate for me, it's fine?
Yeah, please do.
Ok. Eu tive o primeiro contato com discussão sobre raça com meus pais, de uma forma muito orgânica.
She said she had the very first contact with the discussions about race.
Na universidade, eu encontro outras pessoas falando sobre essas discussões e me interessa.
When she got to the university, then she met a lot of people with the same mindset, and they started to have conversations, and that was very interesting to her.
E a partir de então, eu comecei a estudar sobre as minhas raízes, sobre as questões africanas,
So she then started to study by herself about race and racism and Pan-Africanism. So that's how she started.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Asar, you said something interesting, and when we spoke offline, I thought that's an interesting way to just to run with. Is that we're all based in 3 different countries. We all we all got a shared sort of identity, but we're all speaking in English. We all speaking in the Queen or now the King's language. And we all have different accents. I always thought that was a very interesting. I know on my side, I got raised English is my first language, and I speak Afrikaans, but that's more friends and more on a social level. But in business, we all in South Africa we speak English, so English was in South Africa we were colonized by the British, and I also went to back then it was sort of like a British school. We had to dress up in blazers. It's like 35, 38 degrees, but we had to dress up in ties and blazers and long shoes and black, and I hated it. And we were taught. I remember there was a side, there was a type of powering thing. We were in school. We were taught in this sport events and stuff like that. We had to sing all this British sort of like masculine songs, to support our football or what or whatever team. And when I went to go study fine art after that as well, I found again that the medium was just English and English and English and English. And in reading further in art history, I found that history documenting how, as in Black people, as to be specific, as a South African or people in the southern, in the SADC regions, all are English. Not all, but most academic English is all published. History is all published in English. I just think that's a pretty interesting topic, and I'd like to know what your guys' view is on that. Is it a good thing? Is it does it prejudice history, culture, or does it unite us?
Well, let me say first, if everybody hasn't figured it out, we are in Brazil. We're in Salvador, Brazil, and I'm being hosted by these 2 beautiful people. So I just want to make sure they know that.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the language? The languages. How we're all speaking English as opposed to an African language.
Oh yeah. This is so sad that we cannot be speaking in an African language or African-based language, even if it is a modern language or an old language, but we could be speaking, and this is very important to know that as we speak European languages, we had our culture destroyed somehow, and we lose a lot of details in our communication when we are speaking in the mindset of the European, because speaking a language is like you change your mindset. There are things that you cannot express using an European language, but we could do that in African language. So of course, we can translate things, but it's not the same intent when we try to convey an idea that could be, you know, very rooted in African culture or African principles. But then, so this is an effort. This is very difficult to have, of course, a unique language for all Africans. It will not happen. But for example, Swahili is a language that is spoken very many countries, many countries. So we could have at least a few languages that for regions in Africa to be the lingua franca of all this. But now we are still trying to remove African languages, even in African countries. It happens. Remove African languages but European languages instead. So yeah, this is a challenge we should face sooner or later. But yeah, this is very important to us to have our own language. And some people in the history did that, like the Jews. They, if I'm not wrong, they recovered their language in 100 years ago in Israel. What's the country? Israel. In Israel, they recovered the language, and now they speak the language as if they never had stopped speaking that. You know, so we could do the same and recover it in diaspora. And I am a very supporter of that idea. I studied Yoruba for many years. Our culture here in Salvador is rooted in Yoruba culture from Nigeria, and Kimbundu culture from Angola and Congo. So we have a lot of information, a lot of background for this. Although most people don't speak, but we have a lot of influence from this language. So I speak Yoruba, and I am a supporter that every Black person should learn an African language as a way of really free their mindset, right? Because if we're only speaking European language, we are like with not a free mind, totally free, totally colonized.
Sure.
And you know, on the way here, Dr. Igor insisted that I learn, you know, Portuguese, and I was telling him that my mind can't make that switch. It's just not in me. And he just said, you know, we have been colonized to the point of not being able to think in what's our nature or our culture. So I can't even, not that Portuguese is an African language, but I tried to learn Yoruba. I know some words in Yoruba. I know some words in Kiswahili. I know some Zulu words. I know some words in Wolof. You know, tree in Ghana. But I can't. My mind can't make that switch into the African mindset to embrace the language and learn it fully. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I just want to add something on top of that. Given that I'm based on the continent, in academic and in business, the language is English, right? So, you know, South Africa, we're about 35 years old, or, you know, since 1994. So there's a whole generation of kids that raised with Black families whose first language is English. And there's a whole generation who actually doesn't really, we actually, sorry for the language, man. I just got hit with a power cut here. But we can still record. I've got the South Africa. Yeah. I was gonna say about the about a whole generation of kids that got raised speaking English, and now that they speak, it's not really I want to say not unacceptable. It is acceptable, but like it's not really not frowned on, but it's not really it's much better in South Africa and in most SADC communities to speak to speak English. Most people only talk their ethnic language either at home or in literature and like in entertainment, you know, music, movies, etc. But the language, the main language is English. So as much as there's the sort of desire of like some sort of common, I would say African rooted dialect that we can all communicate. Do you think that's practical, given that we're sitting in 2023? You know, do you think that do you think that it's practical? Oh, sorry, man. Did you just get that last bit, because the connection is a bit unstable here on my side? Hello?
Yes, so he's asking, do you think it's practical that we or something else?
It may not be practical in the sense that we simply change the language. It is close to impossible, but at least we should learn some words and some expressions, you know, because that some idioms, they bring a lot of our ancestors, the way our ancestors could think, the way they think, they thought about the life and things about how the philosophy and the philosophy of our ancestors are embedded in the idioms and expressions and the way the language works. So that's why it is important, because then you what is that? You make people be closer to their ancestors. That's the idea of learning a little bit of the language, you know. So here we have an interesting thing, because we got to preserve a lot of traditions, and especially religious traditions here in Salvador, from the 3 different sources, like Yoruba, Nigeria, from the Fon people in Benin, and also from the Angola, from Kimbundu people, Kikongo people. So we have a lot of information, a lot of songs, a lot of you know, many things that we got to preserve, but many times people don't understand what they sing. For example, how they pray. For example, we pray in Yoruba. We have many prayings in Yoruba, but not always that we know what is being said in that prayings. So if we knew much more Yoruba, you know, we would be more connected to our ancestors. That's the idea.
And the language ties you to your culture, and your culture is supposed to sustain you and propel you forward. So if we can't even understand our own language and the thought and the values incorporated in language, what we tend to do is adapt the oppressor's language, English. So if we're talking about anything, it all boils down to aggression, violence, greed, all of those, and that's not what we're about. So we lose all of that just because the language was stolen, and they knew that. So that's why they didn't allow us to use it. Yeah. And incidentally, the Pan-Africanist language is Kiswahili.
Yeah, man.
One good example about language is now. Okay. Fair.
No. Sorry. Continue.
There is a. Okay. There is a discussion now about gender types in the language, like the New Zealand or things like that. So people is trying to change the language but this is the very European mindset of how they see the world, separating men and women, things like that. In many African languages, this is not even a problem, because you don't have a differentiation between men and women when you say something, you know. So this is one example of what we could learn from knowing more about language, because then we can say, okay, in Africa back in the days, they don't need to differentiate that, so we wouldn't know that this is something brought by the Europeans and not like a normal thing all cultures have, you know.
And so it's a lot of, just say, whites don't use certain names anymore, right? Just like the gender thing, because it discriminates between one gender or another, or it's against the race. It's not about the language now, it's about your behavior. Quit or stop exploiting and oppressing me. You don't have to worry about what you call me. Stop oppressing and I don't care what you call me, as long as you're not oppressing and exploiting me. If you stop exploiting and oppressing women, you can use she and her pronoun, it doesn't matter. But when you have a mindset and a culture that promotes oppression and exploitation of certain groups of people or classes of people or genders of people, then it becomes a problem. So that's what needs to be changed.
I agree. I agree, and it's interesting you raised the point about gender. That's also an interesting topic that if there's time, I'd like to touch base on. My brother, Dr. Igor, I actually wanted to ask you this because based on your profile over here, and I think this sort of relates to language because we are living in 2023. We are in the technical, the technological age, if that's a word. But like we have 5G technology and so forth and so forth. And I mean, it says here that you have 10 years experience in research and training and developing areas in electronic systems, signal processing, and artificial intelligence. That I find incredibly interesting because I'm an entrepreneur myself, and we was developing an app. We want to sell art and basically stream events. But what I've noticed here in South Africa, like using some of these AI apps, there's one called Otter, as an OTTER.ai. That app we will use sometimes to translate, to transcribe some of our podcasts. But those apps don't understand African languages. When they interpret it, the spelling is off, and it's actually kind of insulting because it's really, really off. So I did a bit more digging, and I found that there's not many African developers, program guys who are writing code in our respective languages. And is that do you find what's your take on that? Do you think that's a field that African people is ignoring, that we or do you think it's a field that we can exploit more? Because we're talking about language uniting us. We are all connecting through devices over here, and we are not even, I mean, like, we can't, the British did what they did, but I mean, this world over here, we can sort of control it. Am I correct? And what's your take on that?
I think I didn't get the last.
So he's saying, are we as African peoples engaged in the technological innovations and things like that? Because there's always biased
algorithms.
Right, all of that. So are we engaged enough in that? Because it is so important.
Yeah, but it's not a matter of because if we could, I am sure that we would be engaged more in technological areas and things like that. But the challenges we face to have a technical background is numerous, because for example, in technological areas in general are more difficult to get into. There is math, which is the language of, we are talking about language, and math is the language of all technological areas, and math has been difficult to teach. So it's not so easy to teach math and teach you logical thinking, which is the most important thing for getting to technological areas. So I would say that it's more challenging to get it to do capaciting, to do the training for people in technological area than in other areas. This is one of the main reasons. So if you have a country which is struggling to build a good education system, the technological areas will be the last one that they will not prioritize, but will succeed in getting people, trained enough to make technological things to advance. So this is the first thing, but also there is the environment around. For example, if you don't have companies that pay you well for what you do, then you can get the best training in the world, but it is going to be useless.
Yeah, man.
So, you know what I mean? So in places like in the US, they have a lot of companies, and a person with a basic training can go there and get a good amount of money for what they do. This is not the same in Brazil. It's not the same in many other countries that I know, like South Africa. I lived in South Africa. So this is another thing. You have to, so that people with training can advance, and can be people don't advance. So in Africa, in general, I mean, in the whole continent, you don't have a lot of tech companies in the continent. So why would people get the training? And so that's another thing. It's difficult to learn, and if you go for that path, people would learn, no matter if it is difficult or not. But the effort must be worth it, because otherwise they will learn a lot of stuff and will not use them.
And Wesley, it also goes back to the mindset when you have the, and incidentally, my brother here has a doctorate in engineering.
Industrial engineering.
Industrial engineering. It also goes to the mindset of, if I learn this tech stuff and I learn to code or whatever you want to call it, I'm going to use that knowledge to make money. That's the first thing on my mind.
Yeah,
it's not about how does this help to liberate our people? How do we use this to develop our own systems?
That's what I'm interested in exploring.
First thing is, how do I make a lot of money for this?
That's exactly what I'm interested in exploring. Ideas with other people. How do we use these tools, because we're all using Facebook, and Facebook has revolutionized everything, human interactions, human relationships, and so forth. And there's this whole thing of TikTok, stealing or collecting data. The Chinese, it's all very political. I just feel there's a lack of entrepreneurs, especially Black entrepreneurs in the tech field. I just feel that is definitely an industry that yeah, man, that could use more minds. Where do you Dr. Igor, where do you think young creative Black minds that is interested in taking this path, where do they start? What type of what type of inspiration, or what type of, or what do they need to start to learn how to code and so forth?
If young people want to get into tech, where do they start?
To get into tech is not difficult, actually. Now that many things is changing, and the market is more global than ever, so there is a lot of remote options that you can work from home. I think the easiest way to get into tech now is to learn to code. Code is learning, but you can get international job position to work remotely from anywhere in the world. So this is now working a lot. I have many of my students are now working for international companies and national companies too, from all the different areas, and doing that from home. I am professor at university in a small town in Brazil, in my state, and the students are working from there. They don't even need to go to a big center. So programming is a good start, I would say. But there are many other positions and different types of technology. Because now we think technology is just computers and digital technology, but there's a lot of things. There is animal science, which is an area of work. There is many other things we can do in technology. When you say technology, it's a very broad area. But the easiest way is programming. The programming is now, in all places. It is like ubiquitous. It is everywhere you go, you can find some job. There is data science, which is basically a tool that you can use a lot of things to know more about, to extract information from data. So it is used everywhere, like in finance and banks and companies in general are all using data science to to leverage their business. So programming, data science, these are areas that are very hot now at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, thanks for that. Just a technical thing over here that I see we've got about. Yeah, everybody. Hi, everybody, and we are back. Yeah, guys. Yeah, man. Like we said, ASAR, do you wanna pick it up after this? We will. Do you wanna pick it up, ASAR? Hello. Did you get that?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I think there's a bit of a delay in our broadcast.
Okay.
So I think we want to talk a little bit about the organization that these two people have started, and it's called Mancala Institute. And I'm going to let Dr. Rosani, because she's the CEO and co-founder of the organization, along with her husband, Dr. Igor, and let her talk about what they do there.
Yeah, please do. Can you go ahead? And you can speak in Portuguese if you know, if the English tongue is too thick.
Thank you. O Instituto Mancala é uma instituição de pesquisa, desenvolvimento para pesquisadores negros indígenas.
Mancala Institute is a research and development institution targeting Black people and indigenous people.
E decidimos fazer fundar esse
started this organization because we want to put Black people in charge in the research that is being developed in the country, in the world.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. And I would add that this we are focused on research and development in STEM areas, in STEM fields. So science, technology, engineering, math. So we are focused on these areas because these are areas that are not, we don't have enough people and trained people to make science, to make new technologies and things like that. So that's why we founded this organization. And we founded the organization, researcher. He's a PhD research in chemistry and chemical engineering. And he's Black. And the other founder is, she's indigenous, from indigenous people in Brazil. The indigenous people in Brazil, for those who don't know, they were here before the Portuguese came to Brazil. So they are the first people in the land. So they basically go through the same that people do here with them under the same oppression. That's what we say.
So, Dr. Rosani, do you want to talk about a project or two that?
Yeah. I was going to ask that.
Endeavors.
Então, a gente tem dois projetos acontecendo, duas linhas. Uma para treinar pessoas e a outra para fazer pesquisa voltada para as suas comunidades.
So we have two programs, and these programs, one is for capacity building for training of young scientists. We try to empower these scientists to leverage their careers and improve the way they communicate with the communities, because it is difficult sometimes, especially for the science and tech areas, to communicate with the community and even think about how we can apply our knowledge to improve our own communities. So we do this training, and the other thing is
the applied research.
in applied research.
Yeah.
So like Igor mentioned the indigenous people, and that's a hot political issue that's going on now. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, please.
Eu acho que o Brasil viveu um período desafiador, mas muito importante para a gente entender o que estava acontecendo dentro
She said, Brazil has gone through a very challenging process to understand, because we had a lot of issues with the former government, which was the Bolsonaro government.
Yeah.
And that was important to us so that we can understand that we don't live in a racial democracy. Yeah, but Dr. asked you about what was that? The indigenous people.
Okay. Nós entendemos que a gente precisa dar um espaço para os indígenas nesse país, né? E o Mancala vem fazendo isso. E agora a gente tem toda uma preocupação com essa população de maneira mais clara dentro do governo.
Yeah, so we from Mancala Institute, we understand the challenge that indigenous people has faced in Brazil because of all the wrongdoings from the previous government, and we're trying to find solutions for this population too. And what about the Yanomami people?
Bom, agora a gente tem um governo que se preocupa efetivamente com essas pessoas enquanto detentoras dessa terra, né?
So yeah, this new government is more committed to help the indigenous population, and I will add that we are going right now in a very challenging moment for the indigenous people, especially the ethnic group called Yanomami, because they are like the former government was supporting the illegal miners. In those miners, they polluted all the rivers around them, and they cannot eat now. They are starving and dying. People is dying. A lot of children have died of malnutrition. So it's a very important humanitarian crisis that we are living right now, and the government is trying to fix that. But you know, the damage is very deep because the rivers are all polluted with the mercury. Yes.
Sure.
And we from Mancala Institute, we see that as a challenge for us to create and think about technologies that can help in a moment like this. We are not working specifically in this situation, but this is the kind of thing that we want to do for Black communities, indigenous communities in the big cities and in the countryside and all that.
So Wesley, that's two things I want to mention real briefly. How the European mindset and European culture have and continue to destroy the planet and culture, other people's culture. The other thing is I want to point out that these people have put into practice Pan-African professional skills to help liberate our people throughout the diaspora wherever we are.
I think Pan-Africanism is the ideas is easy to understand, and in some sense, I mean, the main concepts are easy to understand. But when we talk about putting in practice, that's a totally different story, because now we have to stop doing things that are already established by Europeans and try to do everything from scratch. And so this is very challenging. So our challenge now is how can we use the technology that was made by all of the entire world, everyone, every culture in the world, every people in the world contributed for the current technology that is in practice now, because in most people, all the technology in the world, from Egypt to before the slavery that they in colonialism that they destroyed all the nations, and we could not develop it during that time, but we had done a contribution, a huge contribution before. So our challenge is how can we use that information that is there and belongs to everyone to empower our people. This is our goal with Mancala Institute. We want to empower our people, and especially to solve our own problems, because we have problems as communities. We face a lot of problems, racial inequalities and all that. But how can we use what we know to solve that problem instead of going direct, always asking and begging other people to solve our problems? Why don't we take control of our own challenge, and then we get it sorted? So this is what Mancala Institute is trying to do with technology and science.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. Do you guys get a lot of support from the government, funding wise?
No, not so
No
far.
surprises there.
This was a discussion between us before, because we thought, okay, should we take any money from the government, thinking that this could be a kind of a vicious cycle, and we could be too compromised with government and something like that. But now we are thinking that the government money is the people's money, and we should take that and use that in a wise way. We should be doing politics with this whatever money we get. But yeah, it's not a problem. But now we are trying to, the former government, they simply wiped away all the policies and all the programs to helping people and NGOs and things like that, institution, and everything that's related to race, gender. They simply wiped away everything, but now the new government, they are more committed with research, with the institutions, and helping the people in different ways. So we are hoping that we can have help from the government, although we are trying to develop some sustainable ways to be active. So we should be looking for alternatives to how to make money, so that we can, this money can be used to implement our projects.
Yeah, I like that point of using alternative ways of sort of crowdsourcing and fundraising, because your issues there about how your government has shut down various institutions, it's almost 100% the same this side as well. NGOs like yourself, who is invested in skills and training with indigenous and communities. Same over here. We have it's almost identical. Our issues are identical, and sucks, man. I was gonna ask you about just another question on sort of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding and so on. Do you think that's a very viable, given, excuse me, my mic is just loose here. Do you think that like crowdfunding, like Kickstarter and websites like that, do you think those are viable platforms to source money for projects like yourself? Do you think it's worth using in order to de-democratize funding?
A gente ainda não usou essa forma, mas é uma alternativa. Precisa só se estruturar melhor para usar esse tipo de.
We haven't used these options yet, but this is something that we thought about using, but we need is to have better conditions to have that, because the point is, this is my my opinion now. The point is, in the previous government, I am always talking about that because we had a far right government here in Brazil, and that was very, very important thing. They were real science deniers. They denied science, you know, in a very strong way. So the way people, the population is seeing science, a science institution like us, is not a good way. You know, we had our reputation damaged by these guys. So if you do something like a crowdfunding, it's not going to be successful, as the population is seeing science as something, you know, that is always hidden some information or have second intentions and things like that. So yeah, that's why we didn't expose the institute for this kind of thing, because it can be it can have an opposite effect. Like we may want to get money from
I get your point.
And then people can simply destroy our image in the internet, saying we are scammers or things like that, you know. So we're being very careful, because the moment the science denial is something important now in Brazil because of the former government, like the vaccines and all that, you know. So yeah,
that's absolutely crazy. That's absolutely crazy and dangerous. Incredibly dangerous. It's funny, over here, our government is not so much anti-science, they just pro-corruption. So it doesn't matter what's on the table, they'll steal, you know, whether it's an idea or anything. So I was gonna ask, you made a point about the vaccines. I mean, COVID-19 was just a few years ago. This anti-science, let me just call it propaganda, I'm sure it's leaving a pretty nasty legacy in Brazil. Is that accurate? I'm talking specifically with COVID, so people who deny you're not taking the vaccine, you know, not following any, you know, COVID regulations, wearing a mask, social distancing, and so forth.
He's asking what you pretty much talked about. Is it leaving a nasty legacy, the anti or the propaganda against science and the vaccines and things like that? Is that leaving you know, negative legacy in Brazil?
Yeah, a very strong negative legacy, because we have, in tropical countries, we have a lot of disease, and we need vaccines for many things. We have a lot of pandemics in the past that, you know, killed a lot of people, and in Brazil specifically, we learned how to vaccine, and the population was very comfortable with that. But then when science denial came, what happened was the population was like not trusting vaccines and science anymore. Some diseases that was disappeared before many decades are now back because of that.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. There are many diseases that are back now because of that. So it's important. Of course, there is always fear that the government is trying to do something to manipulate or to put something in your body. It may happen, but you know, this is a point, talking about Pan-Africanism again. Maybe we will not have the means to produce vaccines, but at least we should have scientists that could check if that vaccine is okay, and if all those things are real, or they are made up virus that was created in the laboratory, and in which there are a lot of conspiracy theories in these things, but some may be true. I'm not saying it may not be. For example, the virus could have been created in lab, but the thing is, how can we check, even if it is true or false, whatever? We simply trust other people to give us the whether the virus is real or is fake or whatever it is, we simply trust them. So it's really, really important to have people with this knowledge to at least check the information and because this is not so, it's what's expensive is developing. That's why it's only the big labs are doing the vaccine. So yeah, that's the importance of doing that. One example that I like a lot is I think it's Dr. Muyembe from Congo, because in the 70s and the 80s, when Ebola started, he was there, and he was in the group of people that first identified the Ebola virus, at the time. So he knew everything about the virus. He was there. So 30 years later, he created a vaccine for Ebola, a vaccine that cures in 1 hour or so. So do you understand that he is Congolese? Do you understand how important it is to have someone from the same community where it is affecting and having the power to create the solution for that problem? Because this is the kind of thing that if it was only killing people in Congo, and it was not being spread all over the world, the West would never do a single research about that. It would be the only reason they research it, because they are scared of Ebola to spread around the world.
So I agree.
If we have local problems, the only solution for us is to be there and control everything and try to find our own solutions for our own problems.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And even here in South Africa, it's quite similar. Everybody, we have this complex called a white savior complex, where in South Africa, whenever there's a crisis, there's a white dude with a solution, and his solution always trumps everybody else's solution. And we are almost 40 years into a democracy, and I can tell you that none of their solutions work, because here we are. I mean, I'm currently sitting without power. So I get you. I get you. Also, the point you raised about the anti-science deniers and that sort of prejudicing any form of like crowdsourcing, that's wow. That's actually wow. That's crazy on like on absolutely. It's actually quite scary. And I think and stuff like that, because we live in a society now where everybody lives in these little echo chambers. So if somebody believes in anti-science, it's very difficult to change their mind because of social media.
One thing that I wanted to point out was that in February in the U.S. is African Heritage Month. Everybody calls it Black History Month, but yeah, I'm fighting that. But the reason we have modern vaccinations today was because of one of our people that was enslaved, an African who was and
it's my connection.
okay, he's good.
Okay, no, I'm continue.
Can you hear us?
Continue.
Oh, so the European that owned him, his name was Cotton Mather's, and apparently the slave owner asked the slave had he been vaccinated against something, and the brother said yes and no, which is another way we communicate culturally, yes and no. And he told him about the way that they pricked him or whatever, and with the whatever germ it was, and that's how they developed modern vaccination. That is ours. Again, why aren't we developing these things? I was living in Lagos, Nigeria in 15, when Ebola last huge outbreak. And I heard talk of how Nigeria used to be at the forefront of developing medicines for tropical diseases and things like that. And the healthcare system has deteriorated to something very dismal. Why is that? We have to figure those things out and do something about it. And again, if we learn science and technology, we learn about animal science, how are we going to use that to liberate our people? Are we going to use it just to make money? Or are we going to try to, do something? And you can I'm not against making money, But you don't have to make all the money. You know what I'm saying? Liberate our people. We need to be free. You know me, Wesley. That's what I.
Yeah, man. Like I agree with you there, man. And on my side, like I'm just so focused on building networks of people like yourselves where we can share resources. That is something that is just lacking amongst 100% of everybody that I know. Is the lack of research, and then and on top of that is trust. And so it's so late, because like we all believe like African problems for Africa, African solutions for African problems, and that's what I'm trying to do in my personal space as an entrepreneur and as an artist. I try to use my voice to do that, and people are listening, and that's a good thing. But clearly, there's not enough. I think there's it actually motivates me, you know, hearing stories like you know of different difficulties and so on and so forth, and hearing like how you guys work with all of that. Those type of things motivates me, because down here in South Africa, there's one thing that is for sure, is that whatever has been working, or that whatever solutions that we're using hasn't been working. I think that capitalism is the biggest, or rather as the final say, and in other words, profit. So in South Africa, if it doesn't make you profit, nobody gives it. Just like nobody cares, and it must make a certain person profit. The profits can't be shared. And I think that they also use the arts as a propaganda tool, which is unfortunate. Which I find is incredibly unfortunate. And that's also a topic I'd like to explore in detail in a future podcast, in how they are using, and when I mean artists, I mean musicians, writers, or people who write for TV, who write for movies, etc. You know, to a degree, journalists. So pretty much every sort of creative practitioner is all like a little propaganda tool, which is so unfortunate. Yeah, man. Is there can I say, is it like, can we leave sort of on a positive note, as Black people, we are the people of the sun. It's summer here by us, in South Africa. It's nice and warm. I was telling ASAR, in South Africa, it's always small talk. You always talk about the weather. Weather is the ultimate small talk. So I know ASAR, you there for a holiday. How was everything going, and how are you celebrating, or do you celebrate African History Month? Is there such a thing? Do you celebrate it? Oh, and then what do you do?
They're gonna talk about Carnival. That's what's going on now.
Okay, yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What's the festivities like? What's the energy like, and so forth?
So Carnival, yeah, Carnival is in speaking of Pan-Africanism. Carnival here in our city is very important. Pan-Africanism. What is that? Celebration. Yes, that's a word. Because in the past there was a lot of oppression here, white oppression, in this city, and they had a carnival and control all that, and Black people basically couldn't celebrate carnival in the main parade places. So we started using that as a specific subject that we wanted to fight against the racism, because that, in some sense, it was a way to groups of I mean, in the city they started groups of carnival groups that they wanted to discuss racism and race, and they were basically based on Black culture. One group was called Olodum, which is a short for Olodumare, which is the name in Yoruba for God. So this group is very important because they started talking about Sheikh Anta Diop concept of Africa and Egypt specifically, saying Egypt was a black nation, a big and powerful black nation. So this group was, all the songs was telling stories about how Egypt was and how powerful this black nation was. So in the 70s, we were talking about that. So that helped to build the entire city consciousness about race, this kind of thing. The other group, which is the Ileaye, was the first group to totally forbid white people in the group, even for the parades, because the parades here like take 3,000 people go around a truck, a big truck with a powerful sound system. This is how it works. So they said, okay, the white people are not allowing us to go in the thing, so we are building our own thing, and white people is not allowed. So what happened was white people got crazy about that and trying to make this group not to go out anymore. So Ileaye is a Yoruba word for world, a Yoruba word for world, the entire world. So Ileaye was very strong on this, and this group is so important that they don't only have the carnival part, because they built schools to teach people to teach children. Basically, it's like we are gonna take control of our children's education. So they built the schools. They teach African languages in the schools, and so it is a whole powerful thing out of the carnival. It's not the carnival is a means to raise some money and to convey a message to the population about Black awareness and all that. But also, during the other part of the year, they also do a lot of things related to Pan-Africanism, because they are always trying to build our own community and all that. So it is very revolutionary in many aspects, because the way these songs are created is all to teach about African history. For example, it works like every year they pick a theme for a topic, and all the carnival is discussing about that topic. It can be an African country, it can be someone important in the past, like the Queen Nzinga from Angola.
Yeah.
And now this year they are picking what is that? A revolutionary guy, Agostinho Neto from Angola. But they can do that for example, Marcus Garvey, or this happening in the carnival. So the carnival is a very big celebration. I think this is the largest party in the world. Our carnival here. So it gathers like millions of people.
Wow, fantastic.
But we also have this work after carnival that is going on the whole year.
Fantastic, man. Yeah, my guys, do you mind if we wrap it up, man? I see my battery is running low over here, and I still need to render this episode. And Dr. Igor and Dr. Miranda, yeah, I think your sound off.
Rosani, she stepped out for a second.
Oh,
She's gonna...
okay. Well, I want to say, man, thanks for coming through, man, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the festival. Really insightful stuff we discussed today. What we're gonna do is we'll, with regards to the publishing of this episode, we're gonna record a few more episodes and then just publish them once off. And we'll communicate that with you guys. So it'll probably be in about a month's time. Give and take here and there, because there's still some other people we're looking to looking to talk to. My brother ASAR, it's always good to talk to you, my king. Enjoy Brazil. Have a good drink.
Hey man, hey Wes, big up to you, man, for coming up with this idea for a platform. And I think your desire, your vision has come true, even with this episode of building relationships among African people throughout the diaspora. So big up to you, brother.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot, man. Yeah, man. Let's keep the dream alive. you know, let's keep and let's they say keep black and keep shining. But
Thank you.
people, much love, much love. Thanks for coming through. Asa, I'll be in touch with you via text. Nah? One love, people. Give thanks.
Peace.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Thank you.